Okay, we are on to something super important. It's important to you because one of the greatest gifts that we get to share in the world is volunteering and giving and helping other people. And when we can volunteer, give, and help other people achieve happiness, it fills our emotional bucket physiologically. It's the fountain of youth. Well, there are studies that show helping others actually increases your oxygen levels, your blood flow, your cortisol levels, the stress hormone goes down. Literally, helping other people helps yourself. So let's go on to talking about recalibrating relationships with other people. And I'm going to share my screen here. This is where we left from the last module. Here we go. And this portion is going to be about recalibrating your relationships, one with yourself, finding your passion, your purpose, and how you add value in the world. So when you find that intersection, because when you have a clear understanding of who you are, then you can help other people, especially the people who you hold close in your heart. So I'm going to talk about them as your dependents. But it could be your children, it could be your partner, it could be that you're caring for an adult who you love, it could be the people you care about who are your peers. I typically refer to it as parenting, but it's really parenting your inner child and supporting other people. Okay, so with that said, we're going to move forward. And one of the exercises that's super fun to do if you have a revelation on understanding your passions and the intersection with your purpose and how you add value in the world, then you have much more clarity on who you are right now and who you could become. Then you have a target to set, right? Well, how do you do that? And what things do you consider while you're making these choices? I call this the circle of strength. And I came up with this when we were going through difficult times, and my two children were growing spiritually and emotionally, going through the illness and loss of my late husband, while their peers were growing physically and intellectually. And I thought, is this right? Is this fair? But in reality, it's asynchronous growth. We could, write the story of what are we going to learn in life and how old are we going to be when we learn that thing? Never is anyone going to have a straight path. So while the other kids at school were, doing their thing and getting stronger physically, and they were doing after school sports and academically, they were growing, we were going through something that we don't want our children to have to experience until they're adults and they have all the circle of strength stabilized. So emotionally, what is the connection that you have with the people around you, with the things around you? And spiritually, where does spirituality fit in your life? And how do you balance out spiritual, intellectual, emotional, and physical fundamental pillars in your life to identify what to prioritize and where to put your focus? So, the exercise here really is to consider these four aspects and put the weight on them of where do you spend most of your life energy, and do you feel you need to pull in a different direction for, interesting balance in your life? It could be that polarization and specialization is appropriate for you. And in other aspects, it might bring awareness to the fact that you're spending so much time on one arena that you might want to balance this out somehow. Okay, so what's another way to do that? And I love doing a good SWOT analysis. When I'm helping someone else with a SWOT analysis, what I typically do is get a whole pad of stickies. And let's take a client, for example, who is trying to decide a job and whether they should take a job or not. And it meant a relocation. So in this case, we went through and we could do it on an Excel spreadsheet, on the computer. You can do it in, on a notepad. I love a good set of stickies because you can throw them up on the wall and then you can see big picture at a glance, all of it at once. So this is like the benefits and drawbacks of something, but it's a little bit more dimensional than that. So in this case, we would talk about this client's strengths. And once we knew all of the strengths that he had, and of course, should he go with this company or not, we then talked about what would be the weaknesses that he has, that he needs to develop in order to take that job and, successfully perform the responsibility. And it also meant a move. So he was going to have to, the weakness would be he's got a new community, he's got new peers at work. The strength would have been a revenue opportunity. It would have been a new role for him. It was a step up for him. So here are all these things that you start to look at. So what other weaknesses could have come up with this big decision that he was making? And part of the weaknesses is, what is he losing by leaving where he was? Okay, then it's important to consider what opportunities might arise because of this decision. And once we put all of those on the board, we could see clearly that the strengths outweighed the weaknesses and the opportunities far outweighed any loss that might be left behind, because there was so much room for new growth there. But there's one more thing to consider, and that is a good series of threats. So in this case, the decision was, should I take this job and move? Should I stay or should I go? And the threats are, he wanted to make sure that what he left behind was closed appropriately. He was valued where he was at, and they didn't want him to leave. So they may have gotten upset about that. So knowing that in advance, then it gave us the decision-making ability to ensure that the way he left where he was done in a professional, caring way, so that he could move into a new opportunity with all of the growth and potential there without burning bridges. Got it? Now, a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis is good for most any big decision-making process. One of the things that we like to do we were doing one of choosing schools and would it require a move. Once we had all of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats on the board, there was another dimension to it because we weighted the value we had on each of those. And that actually is what tips the scales quite often, because when something is valued as a 10 versus a 1, it carries more weight. And you realize, I actually do want that more than I want this other option. So that's what a SWOT analysis is about. Super valuable tool. Okay, what about the children? What can I best do for them? Because they are going through this too. And when you are going through an identity change, maybe like in the example I just gave, it may be a lost parent. It could be a divorce, so they get one parent at a time. But any of those things creates a new situation, maybe even just a move to a new community. It means the people who you were familiar with have changed. And that changes other things, because when there are so many variables, we go through emotional movements so that we can find stability and we can find certainty, so that when there are things that are variable, we're more flexible and resilient in responding to them. So how do you survive a return to the community? Give it thought. That's how you do it. Give it some intention. What's going to change? Where are our strengths? Where are our weaknesses? What are enough stable factors that those things that are variable won't cause us to spin out? Another thing is to listen to what is not being said. Now, again, it's true for children, but it's true for adults. It's true for everybody in between. Because if you can listen to body language, if you can listen to the cadence or the speed or the volume or the tone, I love, like, in the first few seconds of a connection with someone, I listen so deeply, because just as they're about to speak, they're going to tell you how they're really doing. How are you? Oh, I'm fine, thank you. But did you see, like, that, those micro expressions, those few millimoments before, is going to actually be what is telling you what's really going on. Now, of course, I just exaggerated that scenario, but if you pay attention to that first impact or those micro expressions, you're going to start to learn so much more. They are going through this too. When you're hurting because somebody else is in pain, or you're emotionally stressed, or your brain is grinding on something, um, it's hard to learn. It's hard to learn when you're hungry. It's hard to learn when you're worried. It's hard to learn when you're stressed. And you can take the word learned out. It's hard to grow. It's hard to perform when you are so concerned about someone else's well-being. So when you put enough stabilizers in place, then you can compartmentalize and know when you have free time to worry, when you have time to learn, when you have time to address the situation. They are going through this too. There are a bazillion things that are going to come up that, because things have changed, it's not an obvious choice. One of the big conversations recently I've had is that a woman's daughter is getting married, and the daughter is saying, well, who's going to walk me down the aisle? And, she's worried about that. And it's now time to make the choice. So it becomes abundantly clear who's valuable to her, to escort her down the aisle and give her away so that she can maintain that tradition in a beautifully traditional way that is meaningful to her and her family in that circumstance. In that case, another thing I've heard was she put pictures on the backs of her shoes, little amulets, with pictures of who she lost, who was no longer able to walk her down the aisle. So there's so many sweet and tender and thoughtful ways to, go through challenges. I was the Girl Scout leader and put together the father-daughter dance for the Girl Scouts. And my husband, what became my late husband, so my daughter is like, who's supposed to take me to the father-daughter dance, Mom? And she was devastated. I had given it the intentional thought beforehand. I touched base with her very favorite camp counselor, and he stepped up, showed up, and she had a delightful time. I mean, Bella the ball to have this guy, a camp counselor. He loves kids. They had a wonderful, wonderful time, and she felt very special. How do you share sensitive information? Now, again, this holds true for more than just children. First of all, if you've got something that needs to be told to family members or loved ones, if it's great information, you can say, I've got good news. That's easy. People don't always come to me for that. What they come to me for is, how do I share this difficult situation with my family? First of all, don't panic. Separate the rumor from reality and process your own anxiety first. Remember when the kids were little, or you've seen this somehow, and they're really little and they fall down and they look to you and go, how am I supposed to respond? And if you freak out and go, oh God, are you okay? Are you okay? Then they freak out and they cry and it gets all out of hand. But if you calm and you approach them in a calm way and say, wow, that looks like it hurt. Let's really check it out. And you make sure they're safe and sound, and then you help them try again. That's how you make sure that you process your own anxiety first, because otherwise you're conveying the message that they should freak out. That's not necessarily. So you can give yourself a timeout. You can take a moment to meditate. Take a breath. That one moment that it's going to take for you to fill your brain with fresh oxygen so that you can make good decisions and good choices is more valuable than responding faster than it takes to make one good breath. Then assess the scene. When we do emergency response teams, you want to make sure that no one else is going to get hurt. And then figure out what's really happening on the scene. Actively listen to someone else's understanding when you're sharing sensitive information by asking, what do you know about what's going on? That's the sentence. You can say, I have some bad news I need to share with you. That prepares their body for difficult news. When you've given them as much information as, just to start out with, then you can explain in an age appropriate way and ask them, what do you understand about what's going on? So that you can then have a clear understanding of what they've heard and what that means to them. So you can correct anything that was misheard, or because they didn't like the news and were in shock, they might have blanked out at some of that point. That it's just natural. So actively listen to their understanding and ask them, can you please share with me what you understand about what's going on? That's how to share sensitive information. They're going through this too. They want to live a full and happy life, and they want to share their celebrations and wins. And when they're sad and feeling lost and lonely, they want to connect. So it's up to you to explain to them when it's time and when it's appropriate and how to do this, because they have permission to laugh, and they have permission to feel, and they have permission to be the best they can be. They are going through this too. Maybe they had a different idea what was going to be happening at this point in their lives. And how can you allow that preconceived idea to still happen in the right way? They're going through this too. And if you can keep this communication line open and this compassion to understand that you're going through it, and what happens to you affects them, and what happens to them affects you. And somebody was saying, teenagers, they're like, they think they're the only one on this journey. And you can let them think that, but look at the rift that could cause, because what happens to you does affect them. And what happens to them and the way they respond to life and the consequences does affect you. You're going through this too. So how do you maintain that strong relationship with the people who I call your dependents, be it your children, whether you're caring for your adults, your parents, your partners, the people you care about? How do you build that relationship? And one of the most important things to remember is that people need to be the best version of themselves. They bring with them to work or into your life their values and their life experiences. And they're going to have preconceived ideas on who they should be when you change and who they shouldn't be. And they have, like, the example of when a child has lost a parent, they obviously think that they should step into that lost parent's shoes and fill the gap, but they are not experienced enough in life to fill those shoes. Now, we know that, but they do not, because they love you and they want to fix this situation. And if we could undo it, we would, but we can't. So it's important to remember to give them permission, in fact, set the boundaries, that their job in their life is to live their one precious life, not to try and fill someone else's shoes. And be the best kid you can be. All right, stabilizing your family. How do you do it? Provide structure, of course. People thrive with predictability and consistent routines because when there's enough stability in place, then whatever comes your way that is new and variable, or didn't anticipate that, there's enough stable things that those surprises are easy to address. But if everything is unstable and inconsistent, you never know what's going to happen next, and you're always on guard. Find the fun. It's almost a prescription. I mean, I can't give prescriptions, but it's a recommendation. I'm giving you permission. Whatever you need me to say, find the fun. Structure allows for creativity, like I was saying. It's also imperative to take the opportunity to connect and play, even through challenging times. It is totally appropriate to upscale your hormone level by giving yourself a reason to laugh. It's totally appropriate to, even during the most challenging times, find something to play. And maybe it's learning a new skill together. There is just nothing more valuable than that, because sharing a cooperative experience or an experience in common is literally the fibers of building relationships. Maintain community, whether it's in person or online connections that you have, whether it's if you go to school, if you go to work, if you have your routine in place. And then beyond that, what are the extracurricular fun activities that you can do? And I've got tons of them if you need ideas. And also, of course, connecting with nature. Get outside, go exercise. When you're exercising, again, like that circle of strength that we talked about with the spiritual, emotional, intellectual, and academic, it's important to give yourself balance too. And the way that I consider this is to talk about, are you enjoying big motor skills? Do you go for a run? Do you go for a walk? Do you swim? Are you using your big muscle groups to dance? What are these big muscle groups doing to move you around, and your adrenal system to keep things going? Your body begs for it. And if you're curling up fetal in bed all morning and all day worried about things, it's going to have a negative impact on your health. So including big motor skills, amazing. Then let's balance that out with fine motor skills. This would be building or playing with Lego, maybe doing some artwork, playing a musical instrument. That's because there's endurance involved. Musicians are athletes and they are using big motor skills oftentimes, and their respiratory, if you're playing a wind instrument, you've got your respiratory system, you're balancing your posture and your breath if you're playing piano. Amazing. So fine motor skills and big motor skills. And then, of course, intellectual pursuits. Is it playing chess, word problems, solving puzzles, fixing things, seeing how things go together, getting involved in philosophical discussions? Whatever it is, find balance in these three arenas, and you will find that you are engaged. Now, if you've got someone, and traditionally this works a little bit better for the older kids, or your older peers. Little kids don't really get it. They might play the game, but you'll see how it goes. You can try it. With kids who are a little bit more sophisticated and able to articulate their feelings, if they're going through a challenge, you can offer, would you like me to listen, guide, or help? I'm telling you, if you learn nothing else, use these three words, because it gives whoever you're caring about the opportunity to let you know how much they would like you to escalate the conversation and how involved you should or should not be. And if you do it enough with consistency, they'll know to ask for this. I need your help means something very different than I need you to just hear what I have to share with you so that I can talk about it and hear how it sounds with you in a safe arena before I go make any big changes. And then you can offer, would you like me to listen? Would you like me to guide? I love guide because it means that they're going to listen back to you and take your recommendations and considerations. And this, when you guide, they're giving you an opportunity to hear your values and your code of ethics and what you would do. Now, when people get to be a certain age, they're going to do what they want anyway. But if you have set up listen, guide, or help as a standard practice in your relationships, then they know they can come to you in a safe way and that you will respect whatever they choose in whatever capacity. And if they choose the wrong thing or they do it wrong, they also know that they can come back to you and you're going to be there to support them. Listen, guide, or help. The power of listening means, of course, getting to their level and listening to more than the words that they're saying, but what has happened that's causing them to say this. Because they might be telling the story the way they understand it, but there's probably a lot more. So you're not allowed to do anything except listen when you're listening. So listen with all kinds of intention. Listen to their face, listen to their body language, listen to their speed they're using to talk about it at different times. Listen to when they're looking away or looking down. Listen to all of it. They're giving you a gift. Another game that I love to play, especially when the kids are little, is Sad, Mad, Glad. Sad, Mad, Glad we would do just before the kids went to bed when they didn't want to go to sleep, so they would extend it out as long as possible. And here's how it goes. Is there anything that made you sad today? And then I shut it up and I listen. And they talk about what made them sad, or they say nothing. Nothing made them sad. I love this picture of sweet darling. What happened was she had her balloon popped, and that made her very sad. So it's not a time to fix things. It's not even a time to listen, guide, or help. Just, did anything make you sad today? When they are done, ask, did anything make you mad today? And then, did anything make you glad today? You're going to get so much information. I know my son used to wait until sad, mad, glad because he knew that there would be a time to share with us what was really going on at school. And there was no other really appropriate time to talk about something that didn't go his way. But during Sad, Mad, Glad, it set the tone and the place to share what they're really thinking and what's going on with them. Now, we take our turn and they ask us, did anything make you sad, mad, or glad today? And that gives me an opportunity to set the tone, set my values, and reinforce what they've done that makes me proud or glad. I think you got it. So we talk about building an advisory board. And I've written a whole section on that, and I'm happy to help you with it. I've done workshop after workshop. I think building an advisory board is one of the most important things you can do. Other people think listen, guide, or help is the most important thing. But not only can you build an advisory board for yourself, you can help build an advisory board for others. What is an advisory board? An advisory board is a group of people who are emotional supports, who are subject matter experts, who are accountability partners, and people who would leverage their position to help you. So with kids, you can think through those categories and let them know, you know what, if you're feeling sad at school, you can trust such and such person. And let them know it's okay to let their teacher know that they're going to go and talk to the counselor such and such, and that they can trust them. Creating those inroads and the approvals gives kids an opportunity to know how to process emotions and manage situations. If they need to fix their bike, then you can tell them that there's the certain person who works at a bike shop, and that's the person we're going to trust to fix the bike. That's what your subject matter expert. And if there's, let's see, a leverage partner, if you've got a kid who's applying for colleges, you might identify some people who would be good references and who may be, supportive and write recommendations for them. So those are some vast ideas. Building an advisory board for other people means remembering not only to be at your peak performance all the time, because you can't do it all the time, but plan for downtime. Building an advisory board for other people means planning life in advance, knowing that we don't want an emergency, but once we have things in place in the event of an emergency, people aren't scrambling. We know what to do in case of an emergency and who to contact and who to go to. And then there's the surrogates. Who can be there when you cannot or do not have that skill? And I gave you the example of the camp counselor who stepped up to be the representative for the father-daughter dance. That's an example of a surrogate. When you know where the kids might be vulnerable and you don't want them to get involved in risky or dangerous behaviors, you put that person in place. Maybe it's having someone, a buddy, a bigger kid buddy on the bus with them if they're getting bullied on the bus. Maybe it's, putting an adult who is good at listening as the person who drives them around. And so, I mean, oh my God, in the car conversations are sometimes the best. And letting that person know what they might be listening for. They don't have to ask questions, whatever, just listen. That's how you put surrogates in place. Parents can only give good advice or put children or the loved ones on the right paths. But the final forming of a person's character lies in their own hands. A quote by Anne Frank. I call this bumper bowling. So you're gonna throw that bowling ball down the alley, and if you put the bumpers in place, put the surrogates, put the stabilities, put the listen, guide, or help, and the sad, mad, glad, and I think we'll talk about communication, trust, and respect in just a minute. If you put those values in place along the way, those are the bumpers so that your kid doesn't get caught in the gutter, and that they will eventually, even though they might hit an obstacle, they're going to be able to reach the goal and knock down the pins. Okay, 3 things you can do so your kids come to you when they are in trouble. Now, again, you can take out the word kids and put whatever word in there that you need to that's appropriate for you. And I talk about the 3 pillars that are required in a healthy relationship: communication, trust, and respect. And it certainly goes both directions. And if you build this now, then that is going to endure throughout your relationship. Because having a child who is struggling doesn't make you a bad parent, just like being a child who is struggling doesn't make your child a bad kid. So if you play these games like Sad, Mad, Glad, when you offer to listen, guide, or help, you're establishing communication lines that will be open forever. Was it Cats in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon? That one where the whole storyline is how the dad didn't have time for the kid, and then the dad expected the kid to suddenly have time for him when he grew up. You have to plant those seeds and water that and foster that communication all along the way, even if it's hard. And then that's how you build the trust. When they ask you not to say anything, don't say anything. When you offer what to do, whatever, show up. That's how you build the trust. And those 2 together build respect when you honor one another in that way. So that's the second piece of recalibrating relationships with other people, most importantly, the ones you love the most.